Well, hello there. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Mike.
That's true. And this is our final instalment of podcasts going through John Eldredge's book, Wild at Heart. And Mike, which section are we looking at today?
Yeah, so we're looking at the final session, An Adventure to Live. Obviously, the previous two longings of the masculine soul were A Battle to Fight and A Beauty to Rescue.
That's right. And just before we go into the topic, let's reflect back. So we have been doing podcasts every now and then for the last 15 months. We've calculated.
We've been doing it sporadically, that's for sure.
As opportunity offers itself. Our very first one was done in your old home. We had, well, mainly you, but I think I helped a bit. We'd moved out all of your various boxes and clobber and items, and the house was left bare. I think there were 2 paint pots and 1 crate, and I think we both sat on paint pots and we put the phone in the middle on a crate, and we recorded our first podcast there. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Obviously, we're discussing the Andrew Tate phenomenon.
Oh yes.
And then we thought, well, I mean, this will tie into what we cover kind of later in the session. But yeah, just had an idea. It's like, let's just start now. Like, the time to start is now. So let's do something.
Yeah.
It's better to start and do something potentially poorly rather than just continually procrastinate.
Yeah.
So we started and listened back to it. We're like, oh, that wasn't too bad actually.
Yeah.
So that was a real surprise, because I was like, we weren't sure how it went, and then we kind of listened back to it. It was like, oh, actually, like
it was such a
sounded
surprise.
Fairly articulate.
Yeah, I was like, wow, it sounded completely different from what we had just
almost
done.
Sounded like we knew what we were talking about.
Yeah. So that was an adventure in itself, and since then the adventure has continued, and it's been great doing it. Okay, so to today then, our topic is an adventure to live. So John Eldredge, he's saying that what a man needs in his life in order to be fully alive, one thing that he needs is an adventure to live. How does John unpack that point? How does he describe what he's trying to say?
Yeah, so it's really interesting in this particular one, because it is a little bit more, I'm not going to say ambiguous, but like for the previous parts of the book, they're much more kind of directive, whereas this bit is much more open. And I think that the key to this chapter is really summed up in the subheading of the book, which is discovering the secret of a man's soul, because it's really kind of introspective, or to get you to reflect this chapter, and kind of emphasized by some of the subheadings and just some of the quotes that he uses to get at that. So, yeah, asking the right question. And then he says, don't ask yourself what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, because what the world needs is alive people. And then just fully stops. And I remember him giving a talk to a church, and he kind of, when he was going about an adventure to live, he was... one of the things he asked was, okay, just stop with me for a moment. Imagine that all your kind of responsibilities are put on hold for 6 months. You don't need to worry about your bills. You don't need to worry about your job. You don't need to worry about this. You don't need to worry about that. And like, if money wasn't a problem, if your family relationships, if they weren't a problem, what would you do, and who would you do it with?
Okay,
and,
so there's kind of a sky's the limit idea.
Yeah,
we're getting to there.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
Then before that, so the quote, I'll repeat the quote you said. That he said, don't ask for what the world needs, but ask what makes you come alive. And there's no shortage of needs in the world, is there? And
sure.
there's no shortage of needs and demands on a man. So what are some of the needs, the demands on a man we can think of?
Yeah, I mean,
modern man.
Yeah, I mean, if you just think of some of the needs of the world first, like obviously, the world needs more doctors, the world needs more teachers, the world needs more pastors and priests, the world needs, more evangelists, the world needs, an infinite number of things. It's like, okay, potentially you might be competent enough to do them. Are you called to do them? Should you even attempt to do them? But then again, just on a personal level, the man needs someone to eat.
Yeah.
The man needs, a place to rest his head, and so on and so forth. So we have all of these needs, obviously material needs. Obviously we have need for companionship, a need for friendship, a need for relationship, and need for relationship with God, and all of these things. But it's kind of what makes you come alive. It's like, okay, yeah, so going back to what the world needs, it's like, okay, yeah, the world needs a doctor. Okay, cool. Does the idea of a doctor like make you come alive? Is that what you dreamed about when you were younger? Is that what God's putting on your heart now? If it is, then okay, you need to do something about that. But if it's not, then it's like, okay, well, chances are then, maybe that's not your adventure.
Yeah. So I guess he's getting at there's unlimited needs in the world. Fine. Don't just get sucked into the demands people are placing on you, but actually, in your heart you've got a calling. You're designed for a specific purpose. Nobody has your gifts, nobody has your experience, nobody has your position in life, nobody has your relationships and your connections. So what is it that you are called to? There's energy inside of you and it's going somewhere. It's easy to identify the needs are out there, but it's harder to identify where exactly do I fit in to this whole great big picture. That's a hard thing to determine. What is, I guess he's saying, what is the purpose? It's kind of like, what is the purpose of your life? But it's also, what are your kind of passions calling you towards? What you're being driven towards? What do you feel a sense of unshakable duty to do? These kinds of questions. Is every man in a place to be able to answer that question?
I mean, I suppose to some degree both yes and no. Again, I think that's probably why the question is, or John Eldredge in that discussion phrased the question that way, because it's like, well, of course, there may be obviously both legitimate and illegitimate reasons why we're not pursuing what we should be pursuing. If you've got responsibilities, you don't just get to shirk your responsibilities. Obviously I've got a family. I don't just get to like chin my family off and stop providing for them and stop caring for them because I feel God's calling me to do some other thing. I will just say God's not calling you to abandon your responsibilities.
Yeah, it's interesting. Without going into sort of too much detail, I was with a friend recently, and we had an amazing adventure over in Essex. There was a powerful kind of evangelist with a great big healing ministry. He came to Essex to do some teaching, and we went out on the streets. We did evangelism. We saw healing happen. Like one lady got out of a wheelchair, and it was really exciting. We had a great time, but then my friend who we went with, he's having some kind of challenges within his family at the moment, and then the adventure which he experienced, it was kind of like cold water was poured on it by the contrasting kind of situation in his family. So sometimes things have to be at a certain level before we can kind of go to the adventure and kind of stay there, because we have responsibilities. Like it's hard to enjoy an adventure if you know that there's something you've got to sort out, and you're not sorting it out, you're actually escaping it. So when we're talking about adventure, we're not talking about escapism.
It's not as you said, it's not escapism, and it's not like another veiled form of procrastination either. But kind of coming back to the framing of the miracle questions, again it's a technique used in therapy as well. If someone has a particular struggle, the therapist can often ask is, how would you see your life differently if you didn't have this particular struggle going? Again, just to provide a little bit of detachment. And maybe it's, the person's like, what I remember, one of the things when I was struggling with my sleep and I wasn't sleeping well, and I read kind of like this book on sleep and gave you lots of tips to help you sleep. And then it kind of like the last chapter was, if you had slept a perfect amount of sleep, 5 to 6 sleep cycles a day, so you're sleeping 8 to 9 hours a day, you know, perfect uninterrupted sleep, you know, how would you live your life, what would you do, you know, and then kind of it gives some
how would your
ideas.
life be better?
And like imagines all the ways your life possibly could be better, and then the last kind of line was, so just start living like that now, effectively.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's like act as if you've
Yeah.
got everything that you're aiming towards.
Yeah. And again, it's just to provide a little bit of a detachment in that. But sorry, coming back to the question that John Eldredge asked at the church service, you know, so kind of going back to that suspended reality where, you know, you had 6 months to do whatever. Again, so why is he asking that? Again, is to reveal something.
So you've got 6 months. You've got £1 million.
Yeah.
So no barriers on time. Yeah. No barriers on money.
Yeah.
What would you do?
So again, if so someone like, you know, Andrew Womack, you know, and you know many other kind of charismatic preachers will ask in their stories, you know, or in their teachings, of like, you know, if you didn't have these constraints on you, what would you be doing with your time?
Yeah.
You know, because invariably the answer is something that they're not currently doing. So it's just to reveal, like, you know, some of your core longings, some of your deep desires.
Yeah. So we see. So most of us, most of the time, we see ourselves as limited, or we see that we're in some sort of limited situation. You know, oh, I've got the kids at home, therefore I can't do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't quite learned this skill, I can't move forward. I haven't got this qualification, I can't move on. Or it might be like, people don't see me as this kind of pioneer, or people don't see me as able. Maybe, you know, my reputation from my past is dragging me down, and therefore I'm trapped, and therefore I can't pursue my adventure. So many men are within that battle, right?
Yeah. 100%.
Okay, but he's asking the question, if money was not a barrier,
so if you didn't have those
time,
limitations, you know, what would you then do? And I think generally most people probably would have there'd be a generic answer that people would get, you know, that they always give. If I was like, if I won the lottery, you know, I'd pay off my mortgage and I'd pay off my parents' mortgage and stuff like that. And yeah, to a degree, that's probably is true. But even in that,
I'm not inspired, Mike. I'm
no,
not very
exactly.
inspired listening to that.
No, exactly. But you know, it's like for myself, obviously,
it's sensible. It's a sensible.
Yeah,
thing to do.
it's like why it's a good thing to do.
Yeah.
But like I think for myself, like obviously, so I sold all of my worldly possessions, you know, 10, 12 years ago to move to Thailand to try and become a professional Muay Thai fighter. Like,
that sounds more inspiring immediately. Yeah. Tell us more.
Yeah. So, and I had some Muay Thai fights. Obviously, I'm not in Thailand anymore, so alas, I did not become a world champion. But instantly, when I hear that question, I think, yeah, it would be Thailand. It would be Thailand. And then it's kind of like, okay, so probe a little deeper. Okay, so why go back? And obviously there's the testing yourself, there's the pushing yourself to limits, there's seeing what you are truly made of. And again, I think with fighting is so kind of, obviously it's physical, but it's a really good metaphor for just life in general. And obviously Paul uses it, you know, quite a few times, you know, the good fight of faith, and you know, I boxers know not punch in the air sort of thing.
Yeah, like he's taking everything seriously. Like Paul's not messing about. The Apostle Paul,
and it's so that there's that appeal to it, and then there's also the fact that while I know that my first trip didn't go the way that I wanted it to go. Yeah. So there's the idea of like, okay, maybe I could go back and redeem that trip in some way, shape or form. And even the idea of, you know, if you just kind of take the bland response that some people give, like, oh, you know, just pay off my parents' mortgage and that sort of thing, which is great. But like that in and of itself is like a little bit redemptive, isn't it? Because you're thinking, okay, these people have sacrificed for me. I want to in some way sacrifice for them. So yeah, I think that, but ultimately, like, why do we have this desire for redemptions? Because our God, who created the world, you know, redeemed us.
Yeah. God is a redeeming God, and
the whole human story is one of redemption.
Yeah, and his means of redemption is actually perfect. So So he gives us a perfect redemption. And I think that God believes in us. Like, there's a lot of problems with humanity. There's a lot of problems with men. There's a lot of problems with me. And yet you're right. Yeah, we do have a God who believes in us. And I think my proof for that is that Jesus, he gave his whole life for us, and he pours his whole spirit into us. There's nothing that God kind of withholds from us if we really want it. And Jesus talks about sacrifice. Like, Jesus, he's a once and for all sacrifice. He's a perfect sacrifice. Because in Old Testament times, if you did wrong, if you stole from someone, for example, you had to sacrifice some of your cattle to kind of to get redeemed from that action. But then the problem is, a week later you might mess up again, and you have to sacrifice another animal. So there's an idea there of kind of like temporary redemption, but we often make the same mistakes. We have to make the same sacrifices again and again. But Jesus came as a once and for all sacrifice, and his death on the cross, it atones for all of our past sins, but it actually is more than that. It looks forward. It atones for all of our future sins as well. And Jesus wouldn't have given his life for nothing. So Jesus, in dying, he knew that the redemptive power of that death, it can bring us to exactly where he wants us to be. And when he died, he said, I'm sending one after me who's going to rule and lead the church. And he sends his spirit into the church. And where exactly is the Spirit of God located? Well, it's located within every single believer. So the Spirit of God is in followers of Jesus today. And one thing that the Spirit of God does is it calls us to adventure. It calls us to mission. It calls us to live a life like Jesus did. Like, Jesus turned the world absolutely upside down. And now Jesus is calling us to move forward in like spirit. So we've got a general mission from God, but then, where it comes to is working out what's our specific mission. And Mike, I love your path of redemption there, like kind of going back, as it were, and conquering past giants to make sure they're conquered.
I think it's like little. Though we remember our victories or where we've overcome in areas, we do kind of remember where we fell short as well. And it's just interesting when you proclaim the gospel there. I was just thinking about kind of like Christ in his resurrection body, glorified, still bearing the marks in his hands, feet, and side. Yeah. So it's like, okay, so like why? Like, what does that mean? And it's kind of like,
like couldn't heaven have like eliminated the scars from his hands? That's strange. We wouldn't necessarily expect that.
But so here and this has to be the case. So when we look at like where we've been pierced, and betrayed and fallen short and so on. Not that Christ fell short, but I mean in our lives when we've fallen short, it's like those scars which we bear are somehow going to be transformed for the glory of God. So that and like, because so if Christ bore his scars in his resurrected glorified body,
how much more will we?
So surely we will bear ours, yet they will be transformed and glorified. So so it's just interesting to reflect on. So kind of like we carry the weight of our past failures and faults, and where we fell short and so on and so forth. It's interesting, like I've listened to a guy who I find particularly inspiring is a chap called David Goggins.
Oh yes.
And like obviously he's got a number of Herculean feats, like just utterly ridiculous. Like, how is it possible for a human being to do that? But then it's just like the things that he reflects on, like, and you can still hear like lament in his voice, are times where he fell short. Or like made up, and like he'll be like, oh man, and when talking to the guy who does the narration for him, he'll be like, I still think about that once every other week or whatever. Like it was his chance to get into Delta Force, and then like he just blew one of the final navigation exercises, or his chance to win the Ultraman, and he spent 20 minutes waiting for a bike mechanic to turn up when he had a worse bike which he could have just used in the meantime. And like that were actually had he just
bad
got
decision,
and he just like thinks about like those, and then he was just thinking like, do you think that Roger Federer is thinking about all the times that he won Grand Slams, or do you think because of the way he is and how performance driven he is? Again, I'm not saying this is a good thing, but it's just an interesting point just to how the mind works. Do you think he's also reflecting on, like, I think I remember the last time I watched him in a final was against Djokovic, and he was up, match point, like about Grand Slam point, about to win, and then like he had the serve as well, and then fluffed it.
Oh no!
And then Djokovic ended up winning.
Wow.
And like, do you think like that possibly still play? Maybe it doesn't, and he's totally at peace, and I hope he is, because he's considered the greatest tennis player of all time. So that should salve the wounds. But I'm just wondering, like, people like that, do they think about other opportunities they've missed and so on? Because I know I do, and that's why, again, like, that was obviously, I've been a bit long-winded here, but coming back to the Thailand thing, I think about, okay, yeah, that didn't go how I wanted. I want to go back and redeem that. And then again, there are other areas in life as well, and maybe that's not what your how you would answer that miracle question, but it's just good to probe a little deeper to see, okay, so why is that the answer to my miracle question, sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's where it gets interesting. Like, yeah, what like why do we choose what we choose? Why are we aiming at what we're aiming at? And I think one thing that we've said is that one core longing of a man we think is this desire for redemption. So yeah, some of your kind of aims of go back to Thailand and become the kickboxing champ, or sorry, what was the type of martial art?
Oh, it was Muay Thai, so Thai boxing. Yeah. Yeah,
I always wind Mike up because I often just refer to it all as kind of kung fu or kickboxing, and I deliberately choose the wrong words. But yeah, so yeah, some of my aims are redemptive as well. Like I once worked in a church as an evangelist, and evangelism is one of my great passions and callings. But when I worked in a church and my actual title was as an evangelist, what we achieved, it just wasn't so good. It was short of what I thought it should be. So now a lot of the things that I work on are kind of still the same area of work, but I'm much more motivated to put in place strong foundations, so that we can actually achieve what I feel God is calling us to do. But I suppose through all that, Mike is kind of seeking redemption in his vision, and in the same way I'm kind of seeking that redemption. And I think it's because I know I've been redeemed by Jesus, so I am fully redeemed right now, in as far as my sins are taken off me. And heaven is my ultimate destination. There's nothing stopping me, and yet the future is still up for grabs. So I could live as a fully redeemed person into my future and break through barriers, overcome challenges. I could do that, but it's certainly not in the bag. So I've got to, as a Christian, I've got to work on that. What is life about? Well, it's setting my mind on being who Jesus has made me, and living that out in the future, not just in words. So I think we're saying that this adventure that we have to live, like, to work out what we should be aiming at and driving at is if we look at, okay, where have we fallen short in the past, and then how can we redeem that, and then who do we need to be in order to kind of secure that redemption that Christ has purchased for us. And it's so I guess, and that's quite helpful, isn't it? Because if we've got a vision of who we need to be going into the future, then that will get us towards where we need to be. Whereas if we're struggling to work out, should I become an amazing doctor, should I become an amazing pastor, should I be an amazing husband? If we're struggling to define those goals, which are like goals at the end, one way to shed light on it is to work out, well, who has Jesus made me now? Where do I need to grow? How do I need to change my impact on the world now? How do I need to change how people relate to me now? And then out of that, we'll start to get a picture of this adventure. There's some couple more quotes that John Eldredge made in this chapter, and he said, life is not a problem to be solved, and he says it is an adventure to be lived. What's he talking about there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it kind of feeds back into the first quote we read out in the don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes yourself come alive. It's kind of a bit utilitarian, isn't it? It's
what does that word mean? Utilitarian.
So, Lord, this is gonna see me off by using big words.
Pray for wisdom. Pray for wisdom.
Exactly.
Pray for Mike, guys. Pray for Mike.
So, kind of, if you're being like utilitarian, you're only seeing the things for its function or for like the good that it does.
Oh, okay.
If that makes sense.
So it's like utility.
Yeah, effectively. Yeah. Life not being a problem to be solved, but an adventure to be lived. And this I think this really ties into you're telling a little story about John Piper, and so do you want to just share that?
Yes. I threw Mike under the bus, and he's throwing me back under the bus. That's fine. I see how it is, Mike. There was a really famous sermon given by John Piper, an American preacher and theologian, a few years back. I think he was doing like a graduation ceremony at university in America. And he's talking about this couple, and he paints a picture. He says there's this couple, they love each other, they've grown up with each other, they've had careers, and they've raised children. The children have grown up well enough, and they've flown the nest, and they've got to this. They're getting to this point of retirement, and their whole vision for their life, the whole climax of their life, is going to be that the kids leave them alone. They retire in a comfortable little cottage somewhere very nice, and they do nothing in their lives apart from a couple of times a week they go out to the beach, which is near where they live, and they collect seashells, and they decorate their bungalow with it. They don't really want to learn any new skills. They don't want to go on any more adventures. What they've done is they've eliminated all the problems in their life. There's no more risks in their life. They're not helping people with like hectic needs. They're not so interested in the grandchildren. They're just pursuing comfort. They've solved every possible problem in their life, and they're just going to collect seashells and I can't even say seashells. They're going to collect seashells and chill out for the rest of their life, and that is the whole climax of their life. And John Piper, he was just saying, how unsatisfactory is that? Like we've only got one life, and all these people want to do is sit there and make their house a bit more prettier. And it's almost offensive. Like that idea is offensive, because we've all only got one life, and when people just throw their lives away into something meaningless like that, and it's not even that this old couple that they're not even handicapped. They're fully able to go out and help the world. I'm sure they built up a whole bunch of skills within their career. I'm sure they built up a whole bunch of skills within parenting. But then just to sit there and sit on those skills and not do anything with them, not really affect the world in any meaningful way, it's kind of like it's given me a bad taste in my mouth right now. And John Piper is saying, look, like don't have a goal like that. Don't make your life count for absolutely nothing. Yeah.
And just think about like some of the instincts or impulses that you get when you hear that. It's just like, it's so profoundly unsatisfactory. Like, is that it? And you think like, surely like we're meant for more than that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, we have this you see the phrase in the West, midlife crisis. People get to 40s or 50s, and kids are at school or at university, or they've left the house, and you're so far into a job and married or whatever, and you're kind of like, oh, is this it?
Yeah.
And you quote unquote have a midlife crisis, and you go take up some random hobby and so on and so forth. But it's interesting. So in C.S. Lewis, his book Mere Christianity, he kind of makes a case for God's existence by the fact that we kind of have a desire for God. So he will say the fact that we get hungry proves that there is food to satisfy our hunger. The fact that we get thirsty proves that there is water to satisfy our thirst. The fact that we get tired proves that there is sleep to refresh us. And the idea that the fact that we get this sense that we were made for something more is because we were made for something more.
Yeah.
Like the idea being like there is a God-shaped hole in the side of each of us, and St. Augustine says, our hearts are restless until they find rest in thee, O Lord. And it's just simply recognising that. And again, some of these questions which John Eldredge has put in his book, or how he's phrased and worded this last chapter, again, it's just to get you to think about this, because obviously, in the example I gave of, going to Thailand, and maybe some other people have thought, or maybe listeners have thought about like some short-term thing. Obviously, we kind of look at that as like, okay, yeah, but that's the 6-month short-term thing. Our life is obviously longer than 6 months or this short-term thing. So we need some sustaining adventure. And one of the things that I was thinking about when we were talking earlier, Jamie, is we were talking about the importance of routine. And
Yes.
I think a real adventure and a real battle to fight and a real beauty to rescue is finding God in the mundane.
Yes.
And it's
The mundane. What a battlefield the mundane is. like if you don't think it's a battlefield, what do we do with the mundane moments within each day? Think about this. Like, how long can people go just maybe waiting for a bus, say, or waiting for a friend to pick you up? How long can you go without staring at your phone? Like, the mundane is like can be a very scary and oppressive thing. The mundane.
Yeah, and it's again, because it's again highlighted by someone like Jordan Peterson, who would in regards to like giving marriage advice and counsel, they kind of be like, okay, well, you need to chat with your wife and be like, how do you want to be greeted, when you come back from work or shopping or whatever.
Yeah, so maybe a relatively small thing.
Yeah, how do you want to organise, leaving the house? How do you want to arrange your meal times? It's like, you say, like, these sound like trivial things, but that's like 80% of your marriage right there. It's like that's most of your life. And it's like, okay, do you want to be greeted, by a smiling wife and smiling kids, a hug and a kiss, or do you want to come back and your spouse is sat indifferent on the sofa watching television?
Yeah.
And then he'll go on to say, like, that's bloody why people get dogs, and so that at least when they get back to the house, someone's happy to see them.
This is true.
Yeah. But like, that's a profound point, isn't it? And it's like, and like, dinner table or dinner times. It's like, do we just sit there and look at our phones, or do we actually, try and make the dinner table a little bit like more sacred?
Yeah.
Do we spend time actually spending time with each other? Because that's our, there's a battlefield right there, and that's, seemingly trivial, but it's actually not when you realise how integral that is to, your everyday life and marriage and relationships.
Yeah, family life. That's a huge part of life, isn't it? Yeah, and with these titles we've got, like a battle to fight, a beauty to rescue, and an adventure to live. It's easy to talk about the topics in isolation, isn't it? But life is not that simple.
Yeah.
Life is not only about having an adventure to live. It's not only about having a beauty to rescue. It's not only about having a battle to fight. It's all of those things at once. and the harder questions is probably like, how do we do those things together, like in parallel? I mean, you kind of like take the David Goggins example.
Yeah.
So he's an amazing man who's achieved amazing feats of endurance and overcoming physical challenges.
Yeah.
I don't know loads about him, but I think, what is he on his third or fourth wife?
So yeah. Again, like a number of failed marriages and relationships and so on. But yeah, like that obviously, highlights the point profoundly. Though I think he's obviously still an inspirational chap, and you can't dismiss like his achievements, but kind of also it's like, okay, there is a cost to living a certain way, and you certainly need to count the cost. Yeah,
that's right. So with adventures, you've kind of got the headline of adventure, like for me, I might be like, I don't know, if I say, oh, I want to be, like, I don't exactly want to be this, but if I say, oh, I want to be the next Billy Graham, so that's obviously that's a really big goal, and you could say maybe it's an admirable goal, but then the reality of, okay, what does it take to be a Billy Graham figure? Well, you're traveling all the time. You need to have amazing knowledge, amazing integrity, amazing endurance, unbelievable skills at like managing a team. You have to manage teams across multiple countries, and the actual nuts and bolts of that vision. Like, do I want to manage teams internationally? Well, I don't think I really do, because I don't think I'd. Yeah. I mean, I could maybe, if I fulfill a lot of my potential, maybe I'd do quite well at managing teams who are speaking English, but I'm bad at learning other languages. Like, you want to have an adventure which actually you can, you yourself can actually fulfill. And actually, like, take that example forward a bit. If I want to be the next Billy Graham, I might get down that path, and I might find out, oh, actually, I'm not so good at sermons, but I'm really quite good at one-to-one evangelism, and I'm good at managing and coordinating stuff. Is it actually God's purpose for me to be, a manager, like a manager of Christian events? And maybe that's where I fit in, and maybe my gifts and experience is more tailored to that. Maybe I don't need to have my name in headlights and be at the top, appear to be at the top of something. Maybe my role is an essential part of a team in making something to happen, and maybe that would be what I'm designed to do, for example. So I guess having humility on that path is a good thing. And I think that ties into being okay with the mundane, because very few people's life is a movie. Like if you take a typical movie, there's normally like a main character. He does everything. He kind of saves the day. He overcomes his weaknesses, and it's a very narrow view. You're just following one little guy who he all the problems come to him, and he generally provides all the solutions. Like real life is not quite like that, and sometimes we'll be the main character on something. Sometimes we will be the CEO. Sometimes we will be the leader, but other times it's not our place.
Yeah, and yeah, that is exactly right. And gonna kind of think of, so James Clear wrote a best-selling book called Atomic Habits, and in that he's kind of looking at high-performing athletes. And I can't remember who said it, but it was basically that he kind of distilled that these certain group of athletes had to learn how to fall in love with being bored. In that they're doing the same thing over and over and over and over again.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah. And there's nothing fun about that. Like obviously the thrill of competing, the thrill of winning, and the thrill of potentially learning new skills and seeing improvements, they're all great, but they're quite sparse and spaced out in comparison to the hours of boredom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there's an economic phrase for this, which is it's the principle of diminishing returns. And it's saying, if you're a beginner, the learning curve is steep for you.
Yes,
like
yeah,
you're really changing, you're really improving. Like I'm learning how to sing at the moment, and every session I spend singing, I feel like my ability has, to exaggerate, doubled. I'm like, oh wow, I really learned this and really learned that.
Yeah.
But if I keep learning to sing for a year, there's going to be less and less new things to learn. If I keep singing for 10 years, again, even less new things to learn. And then let's say I've been singing for 40 years and I'm in my 70s, it would more so be a case of trying to lose my ability less quickly rather than learning new abilities. So yeah, there's this thing like the deeper we get into something, it does become harder to grow. So if we find, and sometimes people do this, they'll get to a certain level of a particular discipline or a particular adventure, a particular pursuit, and they'll get to that annoying point where you've just got this wall of discipline and you just have to push through it, basically through being consistent. And that is a hard wall to climb because there's no more excitement of the steep growth. And you might have to slog at something for 6 weeks, you might have to slog at something for a year, 3 years before you really make that breakthrough. And I think that's where you find whether or not you're really serious about something. It's like, is your vision of what you're supposed to do, who you're supposed to be, is it strong enough to pull you over that 3-year wall? Yes or no? Like, is your vision so exciting that it's got enough gravity to pull you through those mundane times? And if it's not, then you need to go back and work on your vision, probably.
Yeah, exactly right. And again, so just bringing it back to the mundane and the everyday, it's kind of learning how to, as James Clear said, learning how to fall in love with boredom. It is kind of learning how to fall in love with the mundane and the everyday, and seeing, I think there was that Jung quote which we referenced a while ago, the modern man misses God because he doesn't look low enough. It's just like, obviously, like, you can see.
So the modern man misses God because he doesn't look low enough.
Yeah. So,
what does this mean?
What does this mean? Jung. Yeah, because like you can see God, you can see the divine in like these big lofty ideas. Like you can see God working in Billy Graham, but can you see God working in you cleaning your house, or you taking out the garbage, or you going to work every day, or you saying hello to your wife when you come back from work and sort of thing. Like, and these you need to learn to see God in. Because he doesn't leave you or forsake you. He's with you everywhere.
He's with you all the time. So how is God? How is he there in tidying our room? How is he there?
How is he there? Well, I mean, I was about to do a Jordan Peterson impression then, but
how is he there? Well, I mean,
your room's in chaos, and he doesn't want you to be in chaos. He's the God which speaks into chaos and brings it into order. Yeah.
Well, I suppose, Peterson and we would say, I guess, our room is like our base, and we start the day in our room and we finish it in our room, and it's like a foundation for life, isn't it? And if we've got a good foundation, then from that we can push off that foundation, and the stronger the foundation is, the higher you can jump off of it. And even though your room, it's not directly connected with what you're doing when you're outside, like I work in a school at the moment. When I go to the school, I don't literally take my room with me, but I do take the impact of my room with me. Like if I haven't sorted out my clothes properly, and it takes me twice as long than it should to get dressed in the morning, and I'm not quite wearing the right clothes, so maybe my bum is sticking out when I sit down, then I'm going to be taking stress with me. So if we have like a stress creating room, then we're not going to be so well prepared for what we're really supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I think it was Jack actually that mentioned in one of his sermons that kind of your exterior or your external reality is a reflection of your internal reality. So or kind of like reversing that. So if things are a little bit kind of chaotic and disjointed inside and disordered inside, well, that will obviously manifest itself externally. So you know, you might find your life is a bit chaotic, or like obviously not that life isn't chaotic in and of itself, but like more so than it would otherwise be.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I'm thinking we should start to bring things into land. So let's get a bit practical. So if we could do some step by step, and we're agreeing with John Eldredge that men have an adventure to live. What's the first thing that people can do towards their adventure?
Yeah, well, I think they could ask themselves those questions.
Yeah,
like that John Eldredge asked. So to ask yourself that miracle question. Maybe you've got some particularly pressing thing in your life at the moment. Okay, well, if that wasn't there, what would I be doing? And like obviously it's hard if it's particularly pressing, like it would be hard to overlook that. But but asking yourself the miracle question. So if you didn't have the constraints on you which you had now, what would you be doing? So that's a good place to start, and then find out, okay, so why is it I want to be doing that? How sustainable is this? Is this like a short-term thing, or is this like a long-term big vision for the rest of my life? I totally want my life to like alter course. Because if that is the case, it's like, okay, like maybe work backwards a little bit from there. It's like, okay, well, what are some of the steps that I could be taking to move towards that?
Yeah.
But then obviously,
and then like connected with that, one thing that Peterson has said is like, also we can analyze like, what is it we're doing that's completely sabotaging us from moving forward, and can we stop doing that? Like it's good to have a positive, it's good to have an adventure to live, but if you're planning to do a great big walk and you're bleeding out of one of your legs, it's probably better to stop yourself from bleeding, to heal before you actually sort of step out. And sometimes we need to get the vision of the adventure, but then we need to get real with ourselves, and we need to say, okay, given that this is my adventure, is my own kind of life strong enough? Like, is my housekeeping strong enough to actually go through it? And maybe that's the first step for some of us. It's definitely the case for myself. Like, being an evangelist, like not only can I focus on preaching Christ to people in a compelling and spirit-filled and truthful way, but if my own life not only doesn't measure up to Christ, but if my own life is not strong in Christ and is showing signs of Christian leadership, then I really need to go and work on that. I need to practice what I preach before I go and preach what I preach. And that's the way that God works.
And then lastly, and unless we've missed anything else, again, so finding the beauty, the battle, and the adventure, and finding God in the mundane and the everyday, because that is ultimately where we spend most of our lives. Like even with the big lofty adventure of someone like, you said, being the international evangelist like Billiam Graham, like obviously the big rallies are cool, but there's so many boring and mundane things which happen leading in the run up to that, and it's just like, okay, so it, regardless of whether it's your everyday mundane or Billy Graham's everyday, or formerly, everyday mundane.
And also there's the come down after it. We've done the event, loads of people came to faith.
Yeah.
Okay, great. ... well, what now?
Yeah.
We haven't got that exciting goal to aim at anymore. It's happened. It's been done. I'm knackered from it.
Yeah.
What now? And yeah.
Yeah.
So the mundane.
Yeah. So again, finding God in the mundane, and again, just lastly, just mindful of a chap called Brother Lawrence, and for the life of me now, I can't actually remember the name of his main book.
Practicing the presence of God.
It is.
Practicing the presence of God.
Yeah, there we go.
We're a good team, Mike.
We are. We should do this again. Yeah, practicing the presence of God. Which, funny enough, is because his story is obviously he went to a monastery and
he's got a great story.
Yeah, he wanted to be again a scholar and a scribe, and basically he was just given the task of washing up and peeling potatoes. Yeah. And it's like, that's pretty mundane.
Yeah.
But you know what, he thought, well, I've got to do this, so I might as well pray, and I might as well again learn to find God in the mundane.
Yeah.
So,
and people came to him, didn't
yeah,
because he was surrounded by like high level monks or whatever and they were allowed to do the spiritual stuff. He wasn't really allowed to do the spiritual Bible teaching stuff. He was only allowed to peel potatoes, I think, because his education was not high enough, or there was some reason. But he practiced the presence of God, and some of the kind of top spiritual monks or whoever would come to him instead of the actual designated kind of teachers, which is encouraging.
Yeah, and then again, just practicing the presence of God and finding him in the mundane, and kind of like learning to be a bit more satisfied in the mundane. But obviously, like, there are ways you can do that. So I mean, my house is a bit of a mess at the moment, and lo and behold, I actually like the house just a little bit more when it's tidier. I'm just like a little bit more satisfied. And it kind of, there is that John Piper quote, and I think lots of people have said that in various ways, but I think John Piper will say, God is most glorified when you're most satisfied. And obviously there's the N.T. Wright version of that is like, God's desire for you is to be fully human. And St. Irenaeus is, the glory of God is man fully alive. A quote which John Eldredge uses in the book. And it's just, if you can find God in the mundane, if you can learn to enjoy the mundane, it's like you'll become more satisfied, you'll become more content, and you will see God in those areas as well.
That's amazing. So God has an adventure for us all, which is so compelling, and he has a battle for us to fight, which he gives us such victory in, and there is so much beauty to rescue that even in those mundane times we can find God there and use those mundane times as building blocks towards who we're supposed to be, what we're supposed to do. Amazing. Well, I've been Jamie.
I'm Mike.
This has been the Build Up the Shoe Height podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and God bless you.
See you next time.